A lot of fans are wondering now that after the trade deadline, you acquired so many picks and they're valuable assets. Are you willing to trade some of those for a player that can make an impact right now?
Yeah, simple answer is yes. It would require a lot for us to move off of 7, but there's some opportunities to move back that we would consider. Again, now you're bringing in more variables of what players are going to be available and how far you're willing to move back and forecast what that player currently, that you would acquire, the impact he's going to have. So probably a little harder when you're in the top part, but not out of the realm. We've obviously had discussions with some teams that are trying to be aggressive to move up, and we look at it like, well, if we can get a similar player and how far back that is, plus another player, we have to be considering these things.
It would require a lot to move off of that number 7. Now, I know some fans are kind of weary as to what that could potentially mean. Not to mention is that if you're on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, you've probably seen a lot of tweets go out saying there's madness, there's surprises, we're in for roller coasters tonight, fireworks even. But it wouldn't be the NHL draft. It wouldn't be any draft scenario without all of this drama swirling around it heading in. The Bruins do have the number 7 pick tonight, the first time since 2011. I'm getting all the numbers mixed up here. And it sounds like we're going to stick with the number 7 pick. We're going to get into some of the prospects that could potentially be selected at that number 7 pick. But the NHL draft going down tonight in LA, back in LA. AB, what do you make of just kind of like all of the things swirling around the NHL draft?
Yeah, well, I think it's wild, and I think fans are excited to hear that the Bruins it would require them a lot to move off of the top 7 pick, because it's not every day that you get a top 10 pick, right? For good reason. So I think it's exciting, it's part of the chaos, and it's part of the energy, but regardless, you're going to get an incredible hockey player.
Exactly, and we're looking at a guy, and at least in my personal opinion, that the development timeline isn't going to be too long. George and I kind of got into it a bit much in Boston's Under the Chat yesterday. There's a lot of talent and a lot of talent at center when it comes to this draft, but you can't always just jump at something that's flashing the most. It has to make sense for your system. Boston Bruins in a number of new waves right now. A new head coach. We just hired the new assistant coach the other week. So it's a new era in totality, and to see what's going to fit moving forward is going to be interesting. Now, that does bring us to some names as I teased. We talked about it plenty, but if you are just now tuning in or catching up on everything going on when it comes to the draft, if you're hoping, crossing your fingers that the Bruins stick with that number 7 pick, these are names that have just been kind of kicked around for this opportunity. Jake O'Brien at center, then right wing Porter Martone. This is who I am rallying behind and cheering for, and I know that some people are like, I can't see him falling down to number 7, but again, all these swirling rumors. Yesterday, Elite Prospects posted that he has been in the closest conversations up to the wire with the Flyers as well as the Bruins. So we know that anything can happen. Roger McQueen, I know a lot of Bruins fans are screaming from the mountaintops, bring him here, get him here. James Higgins has become an interesting conversation. We love our BC guys, but he was considered a number 1 pick at first, started to kind of drop down the scaling a little bit. We'll see what takes place. And then a favorite one that I want to get into is Brady Martin. Some people think that his offensive upside is going to take some time, so the development timeline kind of extends there. But this is somebody who's missing out on the draft tonight. Keeping things close to home, maybe.
Yeah, and he's working on his farm, but I think the unique thing about that is you don't know what kind of cross-training that brings. You might be helping out with equipment. I think there's just a level of uniqueness, too, with him and Martin in this pick, but this is a hard-nosed player. He's turned heads with his performance in the World Championships for Canada, so this is definitely a guy that we get excited about.
Exactly. That's a fun thing to point out. You never know what the cross-training may be, but I think something else that we've seen with a lot of these top 10 picks that are being talked about the most is just high character. And something else George and I talked about that always seems like the most obvious thing to mention, but when you're talking about there being a bit of a youth movement in the NHL these days, you need high character.
Youth movement in Boston these
youth
days.
movement in Boston. That's so true. You need high character, you need maturity, you need guys that you feel like you can trust easy and off the jump. Another reason I rallied behind Martone is the fact that the development timeline seems a little bit shorter for a guy like him. O'Brien's got to put on some size, some time. We're looking at guys that'll be making an impact later down the line, and hey, Don't kill me, Bruins fans, but I'm not going off the deep end for a center either, because if that's a need we need today, most of these draft picks we're not going to really see in prime action for another 2 years down the stretch. So we did get a chance to catch up with a former Bruins draft pick. Nate Thompson joined the Hockey Hub the other day to tell us his experience with getting drafted by the Boston Bruins.
I was a lot later in the draft than number 7, but yeah, no, I remember I was in Alaska at the time. It was like a Saturday morning. It was like 7 a.m. And obviously with the time change, the draft was in Nashville in 2003. And I get a call from Scott Bradley, who was the head of amateur scouting for the Bruins at the time. And he just called me. I think I missed his call, actually, his first call. And so I had to call him back, and he's like, yeah, we drafted you to the Boston Bruins. And I'm like half asleep. So it was an interesting phone call. It was the second day of the draft, but at the same time, I mean, to be drafted by the Bruins, the original 6, where I started my career, was pretty special. So something I'll never forget, that's for sure.
No matter what goes down, there's something really special about being drafted by an Original 6 team. An Original 6 team kind of revamping themselves in a number of ways. Could you imagine missing the phone call that's like, hey, your dream's coming true?
No, and that's what I thought was so funny, is because we saw in the Celtics draft, Hugo Gonzalez, it was 5 a.m. in Spain. He was up partying with his whole family and friends. I was like, man, look at the contrast there. But it's cool to hear how he could really recount every single detail of that draft experience. And these guys, and women now in different pro leagues, they're able to dream about this and wait for that moment. And so it's just cool to see how you can really recount all the intricate details.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because when you look it up, you're like, that feels like that was forever ago. But we know that the most impactful moments in our life do what? They slow down one way or another. So I'm sure that slowed down for Nate. Something else that was really cool about catching up with him, played with Marco Sturm, was an assistant coach to Marco Sturm, was coached by Marco Sturm when he was an assistant coach for the LA Kings. So just so much value to kind of his view and his approach on where the Boston Bruins are going. And I'll tell you this, AB, he even went as far to say that the Bruins are going to be in the postseason this upcoming year.
He did. That was exciting. I was excited that he had said that, and I think a lot of people would be jacked up about that. But I also love his just ability. He's seen him in all different aspects of his career and playing career. And I think when you're able to watch someone, even a friend, throughout the different aspects of their life and different seasons of your life, you can really get to know them. And he did even mention too, just about how he takes care of his players.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's such a key role, because if you don't have a relationship, and now today's days with coaching is very different than how it might have been years ago, like you need to have that relationship and you need to have open communication, like he said in this situation.
Yeah, a high theme with every new guy coming in with the coaching staff that's going to be putting things in play. And I love that you mentioned the communication and the different facets that can kind of help here, because it's going to matter what this draft pick can bring to the table for a number of reasons. I feel like there's going to be more open-mindedness to the development, how fast they're going to try to get these guys involved, and what the focus is going to be. Really quickly though, James Hagans, BC guy, everyone's very high up on him. Everyone was looking forward to him going to the Islanders and kind of reuniting on Long Island. But do you think there's a chance we can see him in a Bruins sweater?
Listen, if we have the opportunity, you have to take him. This guy is an elite prospect, and he has the opportunity to develop with Greg Brown and other elite hockey players at Boston College and in the Hockey East. I think that's a perfect situation just for development, to play hockey at a really high level. And yeah, BC, heaven on earth. You got to call it that.
You said heaven on earth. I love that. I'm getting adjusted to all of the dynamics here. It's like BU, and it screams very loudly in hockey, BU being heaven on earth versus BC being heaven on earth. But regardless, we'll see what goes down. We also do have an NHL Draft show where we're going to bring you all coverage of what the Bruins end up doing. We got a great couple of days ahead to make sure that we get the right player in a new Bees sweater. Also, before we go back to break, what did you make of the new Bees jersey?
I like them. I wasn't living in Boston, and I wasn't around the Bruins when those were a big thing, right? I was probably a little bit younger, but I do like it. I think they're clean. I always love the retro. I love throwing it back. I think it's a very honorable thing to do. So I'm excited. And, new coach. We're doing the NHL Draft tonight. I think the newness is perfectly fitting for this time.
That is a great way to put it. It's a way to intertwine the worlds, and that's what I think that they did so well. Kind of some representation of the Centennial also in the mix there.